Is Johnny Mundt better than Irv Smith? What's up with Lewis Seen? Why couldn't the Vikings get the ball to Justin Jefferson? All of your burning questions and much, much more on this Twitter Tuesday mailbag episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Ooh-wee!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is presented by Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made easy. Just pick 2 to 5 players, whether you think they'll get more or less than their Prize Picks projection. You can win up to 10 times your money if you are correct. And right now, if you enter promo code Locked On, you can get a 100% match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. It's Twitter Tuesday, and there's a whole lot to get to, and some of them are very in-depth, so I'm going to dive right into it. Get me your questions whenever you want at Locked On Vikings on Twitter, at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter, Locked On Vikings Podcast at gmail.com is an email address. There's also a Google form in the show notes if you prefer that, or leave a YouTube comment. First one we're going to do today comes from Clay LaChance, who says, is Johnny Mundt better than Irv Smith Jr.? Short answer, no. I would say right now Johnny Mundt is blocking better than Irv Smith Jr., and Irv Smith Jr. is a much more dynamic receiver. I know that a lot of people are going to get really, really upset at that because of the drops. He has one very bad drop, one pretty bad drop. I thought the drop in the Lions game, there was a guy like kind of in his vicinity. It wasn't entirely wide open, uncontested like the one against Philly was. That one was egregious. The other one is just plain bad. But those are only 2 plays. There's a lot more going on, and he's had some pretty good moments as a receiver as well. I also think expectations are coming into this a lot. And sure, I would say against their respective expectations, Johnny Mundt is doing a lot more than we expected, and Irv Smith is doing a lot less than we expected. But compared to each other, I might even write a whole article about this or do a Patreon post or something. Their roles are so different. Johnny Mundt is primarily a blocker that will be part of a passing progression on like a play action pass that's meant to look like a run. And the only reason Mundt is out there is so that it looks like a run. If you want an actual passing weapon, if it is 3rd and 10 and you need to convert it, Irv Smith will be on the field. And I think that's correct of them. Like that corner route, that diving catch, Johnny Mundt doesn't do that. Ben Ellefson doesn't do that. You can't get corners to respect the speed of Ben Ellefson on a clear out route, but they will try it at least with Irv Smith. And they did that in the Philly game. They didn't respect the speed on the clear out route, and that was how that big giant drop got set up, and they almost got a touchdown. Philly's walking away feeling lucky that it didn't happen to them, and future opponents are going to say, okay, well, we won't open ourselves up to this because he ain't dropping the next one. So no, if I had to get rid of one tight end right now, it certainly would not be Irv Smith. Against expectations, yeah, he's not living up to his own expectations, and the other 2 are exceeding their respective expectations. But, put your feet to the fire a little bit. You have to trade one tight end away. Who are you getting rid of? Are you getting rid of Irv? I certainly am not. Depressed Chargers fan asks, the last time... Rough stuff, buddy. I'm so sorry. The last time Dalvin Cook wore a shoulder harness during a game, he trounced the Steelers. What can we expect from him this week? And should he wear it even if he doesn't need it? Okay, so he kind of should wear it. And I'm not talking about I get that he came in with a harness and he put up 200-yard game or something on the Steelers on a short week. But he has a labral tear. And the harness is meant to keep it all in place to prevent a shoulder dislocation, exactly what happened in the Lions game. So unless they're going to surgically repair that thing and actually fix the problem, he probably should wear it always. He should probably always have that thing on. If he has a whole career with a harness, that's just how he plays. He probably should, to protect his body and protect him from aggravating that injury. That does feel like a decent idea. I'm definitely no expert on labral tears. And I certainly am not an expert on Dalvin Cook's particular situation, so maybe there's a reason they're not doing that or something. But it feels like a decent enough idea. Snowman asks, please compare the ways Okudah and Slay were used and which macro-level sacrifices each team made to ensure 18 was accounted for. So there's a whole bunch of Justin Jefferson questions coming up here. And the next one comes from Tony Trout, who asks, why have the Vikings not seemed to create advantageous matchups or schemes for Jefferson after the first half of the Packers game? So they have. And here's basically what I see is happening. The Vikings are trying to get stuff to Justin Jefferson, but they're also understanding the defenses are going to pour a lot of, I've been using the phrase like schematic resources. They're making sure a safety is always over the top of Justin Jefferson, whether he crosses the field or not. There's always somebody. He's either the call, I explained it on a recent show in previewing the Eagles game. The call in the Eagles defense and in the Vikings defense would be called Zeus. You call it Zeus 18, Zeus toward 18, where you'd have cover 6, so cover 4 on one side, cover 2 on the other side, with the cover 2 side, the half side, toward Justin Jefferson, which means there will be a safety on the top of that entire side of the field. Anything vertical he runs on that side of the field will have safety help deep. And if he crosses the field, you have a weak side safety that will poach it, that will try to rob that crosser or whatever is deep down the field. So whether he's crossing the field or not, he's basically always doubled. Thing is, that uses 2 safeties and a corner on one guy. You're basically one-on-one across the board. And so that's the macro level sacrifice. You are ensuring that Justin Jefferson will never have a one-on-one. If you can help it, he'll never have a one-on-one. But you have one-on-ones across the board. It's way harder to blitz. It's way harder to do any sort of like inverts or coverage disguises. You are pouring a lot into that. And so it kind of becomes, okay, do we scheme a way to get around this, they're capping everything type of deal? Or do we take our Adam Thielen one-on-ones? And that's what they did against the Lions, which leads me to the next question, which comes from Brian, who asks, were Adam Thielen and KJ open more yesterday with JJ drawing so much attention? You could see their involvement later in the game, but Kirk could have gone their way earlier, and it feels like they should have. Yes and no. They were one-on-one a lot. Adam Thielen got held the entire game, and it got called the entire game. But for me, what honestly, I am guessing, but it feels like the Lions just said, you know what? Let's just mug the crap out of this dude. Warrior can't hang with Adam Thielen one-on-one, and we're just going to have you, and Lions fans might not even be mad about me saying that, by the way. They're furious with him. And you know what? Just grab, use your hands, keep yourself on him however you have to, and we're going to take some 5-yard free first downs. We're just going to eat the flags, but it'll be better than getting killed one-on-one by Adam Thielen all day. So a lot of those flags where the broadcast didn't show what happened in the secondary and they just got an automatic first down were born of the Lions having no choice but to be one-on-one with KJ Osborne and Adam Thielen, and cornerbacks making mistakes, or maybe just committing deliberate penalties and hoping to get away with it, then failing to get away with it. Now, the thing is, to some degree, it worked, because if you do that every play, they're not going to call you every play. They can't do that. The refs will never call you every play. You can challenge them to. You say, I'm going to do this every play. You better call it every play. And they just, eventually they'll miss one. They'll let one slide. You'll get away with some percentage of them, and maybe it'll be worth it. And when they did get away with it, then, it was a lot harder to find guys open. Watching the tape, I don't have a lot of problems with Kirk Cousins' decision-making. He had some accuracy issues, which he also talked about after the game. And I'm curious, and I want to look at them a little more closely to see if I can't suss out why. But decisions-wise, I don't think there was a lot of like guys streaking open downfield that Kirk Cousins was missing, something we dealt in with the past, but I probably wouldn't apply that label to this week. Tons more questions to get to, and I want to make sure I get to them all. So let's real quick talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You take 2 to 5 of your favorite players, whatever your favorite takes are. Decide if you will get more or less than their Prize Picks projection. So if you are smarter than Prize Picks, you can win up to 10 times your money. And if you sign up right now, you can get $100, up to $100 and 100% match. So you put in $100, Prize Picks gives you an extra $100. Put in 50, you get 50, and so on. I don't really like daily fantasy, so Prize Picks is like perfect for me. It's like daily fantasy, but you don't have to try to fit it all under a salary cap and do the whole like weird game and build a whole roster. It's like a little more pure, like just to take a player and I think he's going to have a good game or a bad game. And that's kind of it. Once again, that's prizepicks.com, or you can get the app at the Google Play or App Store. Promo code locked on to get a 100% match up to $100. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. I mentioned it before, but if you want a little bit more in-depth stuff, the kind of thing I can't really do on a podcast, kind of thing I can't do on YouTube because it uses film, you can find that out on patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. Patreon is a place where I'm kind of being just unadulterated, my own idea of what film analysis should be. I'm really happy with it, so go check it out if you would like to join me, or if you just like what I do and you like to support me. I would very much appreciate it. Let's move on to the next question in this Twitter Tuesday mailbag, which comes from Skull Actuary, who asks, can Daniil's disappearance be attributed to facing the top two O-lines in the league, or is it cause for concern? A very similar one comes from Trill Swaggets, who asks, given the interior pass rush woes, do you think Kwesi regrets trading Watts? I'm going to kind of take three of these at a time. And Schoolman asks, why no sacks on Goff? Seems like they want to have an attacking offense, but a passive defense. I sort of agree with that philosophically in that last bit. But here's the deal. I don't know why everybody thinks the pass rush is bad. I don't know what they saw, but Goff got pressured a lot. He got away from a lot of it. He got rid of the ball, and that's credit to him. And the pressure didn't feel like a lot of pressure because there was always an open guy. But to me, the coverage is letting the pass rush down. And so Jared Goff can just fire the ball off right away. Pass rush doesn't have as much time to get to the quarterback as you would normally have. And so what maybe would have been a win is now too slow and looks like a loss, but is still a good rep. That kind of stuff is happening a lot. Danielle Hunter was like the only source of pressure throughout like most of that game. So I'm not disappointed with his performance at all. I think he's performing exactly up to par what I expected from him. I don't know if people are just missing it or if it's just like not quite as visible because it's not ending in actual sacks or it's not ending in as like splashy of plays, but he's having a really big effect. Yeah, I think Danielle Hunter's doing it. He's struggling a little bit in the run. He's getting washed out in the run sometimes, so that's maybe something to watch, but it's a much smaller problem. From a pass rush perspective, I'm plenty happy with Danielle Hunter. I'm really happy with the interior. Oh, man. I don't know if this thing about trading, do they regret trading Armon Watts? No. Harrison Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson have been fantastic, and then I think Jonathan Bullard has been better than Armon Watts was last year. I'd have to really look at that to like full on ink that take and confirm it. And I probably won't, but from like top of my dome vibe check, Jonathan Bullard's been very good. He has definitely been like a rotational level defensive tackle to be like your guy in the base package. And at this point, I'd rather be in base and calling those defenses than in nickel, where Chandon Sullivan has been kind of a catastrophe. Been a lot in the center of a lot of coverage busts, making a lot of mistakes, losing in one-on-ones sometimes. I would definitely say no, they do not regret trading. And they didn't trade Watts, by the way. They cut Watts to save some money. And they traded for Ross Blacklock, who is a backup who hasn't been that great, but he's also a backup. He's like a barely on the roster kind of guy to me. Jonathan Bullard's a genuinely good player, I think. Tom Johnson vibes. Skullman's question, it seems like they want to have an attacking offense but a passive defense. I definitely agree with that. So no sacks on Goff is because of the stuff I already mentioned. He got out of the pocket very well. Goff himself played pretty well to avoid those sacks, but also problems in the coverage, mistakes, leaving guys wide open, not on purpose stuff, like not the way the play was designed being exploited, but players not being where they're supposed to be, leaving guys wide open so he can get rid of the ball and then it won't be a sack. That's why that happens. I will say I wish they blitzed more. I think they blitzed like 10 times this game, and this is the most they blitzed all year. I really wish they blitzed more, but they might just not feel very comfortable unleashing those pressures yet because it puts more pressure on the coverage, which already can't hang. The Mad asks, I hated the move to replace Pierce with Phillips. Felt like getting Diet Pierce because he was cheaper at the time. 3 games into the season, how's that move looking? About as good as it can. I don't know how Michael Pierce is doing right now. No idea there. But in terms of Phillips, he is better than Pierce was last year, probably. It's like debatable, but it feels like it favors Phillips, and maybe you can talk me out of that. And it's cheaper. Yeah, Phillips is absolutely crushing souls. He's splitting double teams. He's actually making some impact in the pass rush. He's been phenomenal. He's been at the center of a whole bunch of really important fourth and short stops. He's been very good. So I'm pretty happy with that. Ruben Frost asks, how's Darisaw looking? Haven't heard anything. Also, whoo boy, he is crushing it. You haven't heard anything for a very good reason. But he's been unbelievably consistent. Consistency is the word that's come to mind with me with Christian Darisaw so far. He had a couple of problems earlier in the season. He got beat on some run plays and stuff, and he set wrong a couple of times. They felt a little bit more like mental errors than physical errors. About as pristine as you can get against the Lions, against Charles Harris and embarrassing Aiden Hutchinson. Unbelievable day that he's coming off of. And now I think we're closer to a Pro Bowl conversation with him than we are to any sort of like level of concern. King Squeaks asks, how was Matelis' day outside of his interception? I'm not sure if he looked good. I was pretty happy with it. For a backup, Harrison Smith, basically, and they had him doing Harrison Smith's roaming kind of role, that centerpiece of the defense, backup centerpiece, if you will. Pretty good day. I actually have a thread on Twitter that I did breaking down some of the big moments for him and how he played as that sort of, it's like the extra safety on the weak side of the field where you very often don't end up having a job. Like you are kind of assigned to cover someone that stays into the protection or goes to the flat or something like that, and you don't actually have a role anymore. And so your role becomes roam around, find work, go do something. And I thought he did pretty well there. The interception that he dropped was a very good play. And then the interception that he actually caught was just a gift, but it felt like a deserved gift. Good for you, Josh Matelis. I think you deserved that. Mirgondo asks, are we ready to finally declare the O-line average / above average in the league? Almost. Can I say almost? It's been inconsistent, I think. I want to see a little more consistency from the interior, from Ingram and Bradbury and Cleveland. Pretty good day on the whole against the Lions, but I want to see a little more consistency, but I'm not far away from that, I don't think. Matt Nelson asks, seems like our defense is getting eaten up by cheap completions in the flats that turn into an easy 8-yard gain. Is it just as simple as we don't have the speedsters we drafted on defense, seen Asamoah and Booth, to bring their closing speed? That might be some of it, but a lot of the mistakes that I've talked about, the coverage busts and stuff, are that. That miscommunications, a lot of the stuff I've criticized Chandon Sullivan about when I say he's been a catastrophe, a lot of that is miscommunications with him and a linebacker, him and a cornerback, him and a safety. It's kind of always Chandon and someone else, and there is a decent enough shot that it's somebody else's fault and it's Chandon's the only one that's right all the time and everybody else is struggling. Like, I honestly wouldn't be that shocked. Everybody's new to this, so kind of anything is possible, but like, I don't know, come on, man. It kind of feels like he's always involved in it, but that does feel like I think that's a really big execution problem and the kind of thing you would focus on say, a bye week. Tommy Litz asks, explain wide receivers declaring. Usually it's just a wide receiver making his final break and turning his head to look back for the ball, but in watching replays, I'll sometimes see a wide receiver throw up his hand and quickly pull it back at or just before his break. Is this a signal to the quarterback that he is changing or adjusting his route on the fly? I would have to see what you're talking about exactly. I can't say that I can fully visualize what you're talking about. Sometimes you will see them use their arms for balance and for like timing. They'll actually kind of throw their arms up in a certain way to help them like cut faster. It's a physical thing. But sometimes I could see it being, he went on to mention like an example of Justin Jefferson doing that. I could see that being a thing you do to mess with a corner. You're not signaling anything to a quarterback though. Typically you will have your eyes away from the quarterback and you can't even guarantee that the quarterback will have his eyes on you. So when it comes to like reading defenses, something like a choice route where you're running against leverage and you both have to read it the same way, you just kind of have to be on the same page. There's not like any communication that actually happens. You just have to both know it. Josh asks, procedural question. They always give the defense a chance to sub if the offense does, but how do they know which personnel package they're trying to match? Does the offense have to inform them if it's 21, 22, 11, etc.? You get to watch. The defense gets a moment to watch and see who comes on the field. So you have somebody know, oh, okay, 11's a receiver, 82's a tight end, bring them all on, and then you can substitute accordingly. You have to make that decision split second, and if you're too slow about it, it can cause like clock issues, delay of game issues. That's the kind of thing where if it gets super messed up and the defense takes a timeout and you have no idea why, sometimes it's messing that kind of thing up. But you do get a chance to see who is in the huddle and then substitute accordingly. Jay Hine asks, if you were Kwesi and Buffalo came along calling on our safeties, Micah Hyde on season-ending IR and Poyer missing last week with a foot injury, which safeties do you dangle and what would be your price? I don't know if I feel great about selling pieces right now. I don't like when I see a deep room, I see that as a very good thing you can lean on and not a thing you can sell necessarily. Unless you have too many guys to be on your roster, then you sell it, right? Like that was the talk about like selling Alexander Mattison before the season. Oh, hey, we've got 5 usable running backs if you count CJ Ham. You don't need that many, so let's get rid of one. But with safeties, they definitely only have 4 rosterable ones. Otherwise, you'd have to like start promoting Miles Dorn, and I don't think I feel very comfortable with that. So I think I would probably say no. Ask Buffalo to move on, but if you did want to get rid of someone, it would probably be someone on the lower end. It'd be Matelis or Bynum. I don't think I'm willing to. I mean, I'm definitely not willing to part with the first round pick. Definitely not willing to part with Harrison Smith. So it'd have to be one of the other two, but I don't like it. James K asks, is there a pattern with Ed Ingram's pass blocking losses? What do you think he needs to correct to get back to looking like his preseason self, other than going up against 2s and 3s? He oversets, and he's mentioned this. He's not splitting. Like, it depends on the protection call, but a lot of protection calls require you to be hip to hip with the guy next to you. And for the guard, often that's the center. Sometimes it's the center and the tackle. Sometimes the tackle splits off, but really it's him with Bradbury. He needs to be in Bradbury's pocket. And there is a little bit too much space there a little too often. And whose fault that is, maybe Bradbury set too far inside or something like that. But I would guess it's the rookie's fault. Usually decent rule of thumb. You can't go too wrong guessing that it's the rookie's fault. And oftentimes, they're getting beat inside that way. So just setting too far outside, that's what it means by what you mean by oversetting. Also against stunts, he's just committing a little bit too far. Somebody crashes inside, you follow him too far to the inside, someone's looping around and then gets outside of you, or you're in bad position or something. That's what's happening there. I will say, though, it's not catastrophic. It's not great, but it's not catastrophic. You need to see improvement, but right now I would say he looks like a rookie out there. It doesn't look like a bad rookie. It doesn't look like a good rookie. He looks like an average rookie. You need to see that improve, by this time next year. But you expect some of this stuff. But right now it's try to be a little bit more responsible with how you set up in your pass protection and don't be so wild and uncontrolled with it. Pick a spot and find it and build your house. GC asks, what the heck is with James Lynch playing significant snaps? I get they want to keep guys fresh, but it seems like he gets washed out every play. I don't have the snap count in front of me, but on memory, I think he played 2 drives. That's pretty normal to have your backups in for like 2 of the 12 defensive possessions. That's pretty normal rotation. If it's more than that, then yeah, that's a little bit weird. But hey, you're asking your players to, hey, how do you feel? Do you need rest? Like, how do you feel about this? Sometimes you go in with a plan. How'd you feel last time? Did you feel like you got too tired? Should we maybe work in another one? How are we doing this? Those conversations happen on the sideline, and it kind of is up to that if it's a thing about fatigue. But that so far it has felt, or at least in this last game, it felt like a normal amount of rotation. Maybe it's just that the difference between starters and backups feels really stark, so we notice it a little bit more. But I don't know if you can afford to put them in less unless your players are able to handle it conditioning-wise. But that's real hard for those big guys. You don't want to ask those big guys to play all 60 minutes. That's a recipe for being gassed at the end of the game. Dangerously Unqualified asks, ugly or not, it was a division win. I didn't expect so much pessimism about the rest of the season. Which long-term issues do you see players getting used to schemes? We expected mistakes early on with new coaches. If we get to the bye over 500, that seems like more than we hoped. Yeah, I think if you can get to the bye, if you get to the bye at 3-3, that's not a great spot. I think if you get to mid-season at 500 and then like try to project a surge of sorts, then maybe you can, make a push here. I am not like long-term pessimistic. I'm short-term pessimistic. And I was short-term pessimistic. Like, yeah, we expected these problems. And I also expect these problems to cost us games. Like, hey, get ready for that. That's my pessimism, I guess. But yeah, I do think if you could get to like the mid-season point and still be in the thick of things, maybe make a run at this, I could see it. But I do also foresee a very inconsistent team. The kind of team that can maybe go kick the crap out of a Super Bowl contender and then lay an egg the next Monday night. You know, a team that like hypothetically did that kind of thing. Matt Blaseg says, sorry if I butchered that, by the way. It says, big doors at US Bank Stadium were open during the game. That end is where Joseph missed both of his field goals and where the Lions kicker missed his long field goal. All three were pushed wide right, the direction the wind would be blowing into the stadium. Do you think teams should take this into account? So I don't think so. I think that was a joke that Brady Quinn said on the broadcast. Apparently, we talked about this on the Minnesota football party a little bit. Apparently, Arif Hassan looked like scoured it and came away with no. So it sounds like he put enough work into it for me to just say go with that. And finally, a fate worse than Seth asks, but who was the last Pro Bowl quality defensive player drafted by the Vikes? Kendricks, right? That was a long time ago. Okay, just looking at the first 2 days, you can count them, I believe, on one hand. So rounds 1, 2, and 3, right? Because you don't expect Pro Bowlers day 3. Mackenzie Alexander, Mike Hughes, Jeff Gladney, Cameron Dantzler, Chaz Surratt, and then the guys from this year. So 5 of them, other than the rookies right now. In the last 5 years, you're averaging like 1 a pop in 3 different rounds. They've been drafting way more offense. Oh, and Patrick Jones, I guess. So that's 6. So that's a huge part of it. Yeah, and then you can look and say, well, that's not a great hit rate, right? You got Mike Hughes, you've got Chaz Surratt, right? So yes, not a great hit rate, but also very, very low volume. And in terms of offense, there's been a whole bunch of really good players that came in. Brian O'Neill, and of course, Justin Jefferson. We're pretty happy with Ezra Cleveland. Christian Darrisaw looks great. So I don't know if you can necessarily split it into offense and defense without losing a whole bunch, right? And why don't they draft a lot of defense? Well, because they had guys at like every position. You're not going to draft an edge rusher when most of that time you had Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin. You're not going to draft safeties when you've got Harrison Smith and then like Sendejo and or Anthony Harris. You're not going to draft linebackers when you have Barr and Kendricks. So they weren't in the market for it. And so a lot of these, like, well, the Vikings have been 3 years since they drafted blah, 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 isn't a reflection of priorities. It's a reflection of just where their roster was at. I see that way too much in draft season. Like, they haven't drafted a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds in 20 years. It's like, well, they've had good wide receivers the whole time. Why do you think that is? So I don't think that that's particularly meaningful. It just is another way of saying, like, Mike Hughes didn't pan out. But hey, got us a win in a roundabout way. I'm going to go a little deeper tomorrow, go way deeper on Patreon, but a little bit deeper tomorrow in some of these questions. Talk a little bit about the run game and some other stuff that I have queued up. So I'm excited to share that with you. And then we go into Saints mode. Very exciting stuff. I'll see y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.